Welcome to the Live the Call podcast, where I speak with guests living and working their soul's purpose. I'm Pamela Downes, founder of Spirit Calling and trance channeler of the Great Council of Light. Every episode, our guests share their awakening story, and together we learn how they came to live their spirit's call. Join me in tales of self-discovery, enlightenment, and transformation to amplify your healing journey. Today on the show, we have my dear friend, Vipul Bhesania. Vipul is an intuitive life healer, an emotional wellness advisor, a writer, a poet, and the host of Soul Wisdom Stories podcast. His conversations invite you to explore and discover your soul's truth. So today, you and I are going to talk about something that actually brought us together, something that we're both really passionate about and that's special to us in our lives, in our individual journeys, and then, both of our journeys together, and has become something that's just been like a glue almost that continued our conversations going, that brought our friendship closer and closer over the course of a couple years, right? It's the sacred ritual and healing modality of ayahuasca. So I'm so excited to speak with you about this today. And so welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And
You're welcome.
as always, I enjoy talking to you. I enjoy our conversations, and we've had so many conversations about so many different things. Um, and I wish they were all turned into podcasts because there's so much insight in what we talk
Mm.
about because of the journey that we've been on individually and together the last few years as well. So yeah, I'm excited for this.
Me too. So I think one of the things that you and I have talked about during, all of our conversations over the last several years is how we had a call, how it was a call that came from deep inside of us. It wasn't, we saw a promotion or we heard it from someone. It was like a knowing, an experience, an introduction that happened organically for each one of us. And we'll talk about that. But it was like a divine calling, a deep sense of knowing that this was the next part of our healing journey, right?
Yeah, it was. And I do think that you do hear about it in so many places now
Mm-hmm.
because it's so popularized and people do it for different reasons at different times. And there's like pop-up shops of it like all
Yeah.
over the place now. So most people have heard of it. I mean, I initially heard of it. I think it must have been on Joe Rogan's podcast like 10 years ago now. So I think that planted a seed,
Mm-hmm.
but I never took action on it straight away. So I knew about it in 2014, 15, 16, just as this other alternative healing practice, but it wasn't something that I felt called to doing. And I think what you talked about at the beginning of it being a deep-seated call is
Yeah.
what I was really waiting for. You know, I was like, this is a great piece of information, but it may not be for me
Mm-hmm.
until it feels like an overwhelming urge where I'm being pulled by something bigger than me. Then I know the time is right to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So when people ask me, oh, like now you've done it, would you recommend it to others? And can you tell me about it? And like, what are your thoughts on it? It's not a simple answer because
Mm-hmm.
there's so much nuance on it that it's not a yes or no. If I was to give a simple answer, it would be, what's your intention?
Mm-hmm.
And get people to tune into that. It's not something that you just tick off a bucket list because you've been doing all these drugs or because you've tried every other healing thing and you're like, well, maybe this is the next thing that's going to be the magic pill. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And for me, I was, experiencing all of these different things. My journey, like I started unfolding, my spirituality started unfolding before me, and I was having experiences. And I was on this quest to quench this thirst that I had to know more and more and more. And I happened to stumble upon it. There was a video that I talk about this all the time on all these podcasts that I appear on. I saw a video of Gerald Powell, who was addicted to sex, gambling, food, alcohol, like everything. And he talked about how he was almost going to kill himself. He was at the end of his rope, and he was flying to a vacation somewhere, and a friend called him, and a friend said, "I know someone who did ayahuasca, and they healed themselves of all of their addictions. And if you're interested, I'll tell you the place that I went." And he said, "Nah, that's not for me. And she said, I knew you were going to say that. So he did it on a challenge and he talked about how he healed. I saw the video of how he healed, but it wasn't his story per se. It was this calling started. I knew that I was going to, he created a center in Costa Rica. I knew that I was going to go to that center. I had this knowing. It's when my clair gifts were opening up. There was this deep sense of knowing I was going to go there and I was going to do it there. And I didn't know how, and I didn't know all the details, but it was something I just understood about myself. So when you say calling, it can mean so many different things. You know, it's something that resonates with you. I was also scared of it. I had a fear of it, and I understand that that's a reverence. You know, I understand that that's a reverence, and that's part of also the journey of healing. Right, everything you do is pushing through fear to get to the other side of what was on that fear. Um, so I love that you said, you know, you saw it and you weren't really called to it immediately, but then it became something that you felt that you needed to pursue.
Yeah, when the time was right. And I think
Yeah.
when that's a very subjective thing. So there's two things to just clarify here. One is like you do it when the time is right in your life if you feel called to it. And then like on the other side, there's this whole conversation about how it may not be for you at all for this lifetime
Hmm.
altogether. You know, some people are not required to walk the path of medicine for their healing. Does that mean you're not going to heal? Does that mean you can't like break through the things that you're trying to work on and get to that next authentic version of yourself that experiences a new level of healing? No, like you can still reach that as long as you are using the tools that feel best for you, that feel most comfortable for you. So um yeah, so when people ask me like, is it the right thing? Should I do it? What do you recommend? First of all, I'm not an expert. Like I can only
Right.
talk, like both you and I can only talk
Right.
from an
Mm-hmm.
experiential point of view. Like the expert, so to speak, in my eyes, would be, for example, the shaman that I worked with there.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Peru, as in 2019. I felt called when that calling came. I also knew where I was going to do it, and it wasn't. I didn't have to spend time researching. Like I just knew this is the place, and how did I know? I don't know. Again, it's
Right.
one of those things where it's already doing its work before
Yes.
I got into the room. So all of these things, I mean, I would go as far as to say the fact that I heard about it on a podcast many years back was again, it's it doing its thing,
Mm-hmm.
beginning to work many years before you actually enter the room. Many months, many days, many weeks before you actually enter the room, it's already doing its
Mm-hmm.
work. I didn't know that at the time. This is now with the benefit of hindsight, understanding or at least beginning to understand how all of this works.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like the shaman that I ended up working with at Spirit Quest, Don Robert, he at that time I think was 78 years old and had done over hosted and held space for over 10,000 ceremonies. And he drank it multiple thousands of times since the age
Mm-hmm.
of 8. So this was like in his lineage. He was born and raised in the jungle and had become intimately acquainted with the medicine, knew how it worked, knew the ins and outs of what it was about, and he. I got the sense from him that he also knew the intention of people before they even knew the intention that they were saying.
Mm-hmm.
The energy of the person coming in, like he could just feel it. I mean, we didn't speak the same language, hence why we had my dear friend and brother Parker there to translate Spanish to English for us and be that kind of bridge. And yeah, Don Robert, I mean, he didn't have to say any words, but it was the energy that he carried.
Mm-hmm. Unity.
There was this lightness about him.
Yeah.
There was this lightness about him where he knew that this was all fun and games. This was all just part of this transient illusion that we're living in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult because the people that are coming in have got so many questions. They're in their head. They're trying to figure out different things in their life, different things that have happened to them that they're trying to heal from and get the answers to. And I think someone at that level who's that deep into doing the work, um, is really like really understands that
Mm-hmm.
death is something that is a truth that he's really deeply connected to and understands, and knows that whatever's happening is going to pass by, just in the blink of an eye. It'll pass
Hmm.
by, just like all your other past lives have. And you will continue this journey on and on again. Like, a good way to describe it is like, I'm wearing a mala bead right now, and there's many beads on this. So think of each bead as a life, as your life, and the string is the thread of consciousness that connects all of them together. So as you move from one beat to another, you're just continuing
Ooh.
an ever unfolding story. It's your current life didn't start where it is right now. You're coming from a whole host of chapters that you've already lived, you've written, you've rewritten, you've lived out, and now here you are experiencing the next chapter of your life, whatever it might be. So I think taking that broader it's helped me take that broader point of view. Yeah, I'll leave that there because
Yeah.
I feel like
No,
there's
I
so
love
many
it.
tangents already
Yeah,
of stuff
I
that I want to
know.
share.
Well,
But yeah,
it's making me think about you and I, and,
yeah,
how we ultimately found each other in this lifetime,
yeah,
and the sense of knowing that we had when we met each other. So you talked about going to do ayahuasca in 2019, and that's what happened with me. I went in
mm,
2019, the same month, the same year. You were
yeah,
drawn to a different part of the world. We were both doing the medicine at the same time. We happen to have unique healing experiences, but very similar experiences post doing the medicine and going back to our world. And we found each other through a group that we were both a part of. We happened to go to the same it was during COVID,
mm,
so everything was virtual. We happened to go to the same Saturday afternoon experiment that a friend of ours in the spiritual community was having. And they did breakout rooms, right? And
yeah. I
you
remember
and I
this.
met, and it was just instantaneous. Like, we knew each other. We just shared our stories of what we had just gone through, and we couldn't believe it. Like, we couldn't believe it. And I was like, I just did ayahuasca, and I was in Costa Rica, and I'm experiencing this. And you were like, I just did ayahuasca. And you and I met every Saturday and talked for hours. You and I were each other's integration support system, basically. Like, we were able to share, we were able to dive deep into these journeys of healing that we were experiencing. And you could relate to me, I could relate to you. And, the beads on the thread of consciousness, that we have clearly been together in many past lives. There's this sense of understanding that I know you and I love you so much. And you're on the other side of the world. There's this gigantic gap in age, and none of that matters because our souls recognize each other, and we have the same understanding, and we have the same shared purpose of our work on the planet. Um, but that's, I just covered how we met, right? But the fear that I think that everyone is working through ultimately on their healing journeys, right? It's all about moving through fear to understand the greater part of you, to heal your soul, to move into your soul's purpose. Each step that you take on your path, and people might start out with a modality like Reiki, or they might start out with a modality like working with a practitioner, like an Akashic Records block release, or QHHT, or whatever those things are. And this is one of those tools in the tool belt. It's like a higher level, greater understanding, commitment to it. I don't know, am I explaining that right? You know what I mean? It's like you have to start by using and doing those modalities to be able to get to you're stepping up to the plate for in a big way for a big game. And that going into it. That there's prep involved, there's intention involved, there's like with mine, I had a trip already planned. I had already had a trip planned in November of 2019. I was going to Italy with family, which ultimately is something I'm working on trying to heal. And Grandma Raya came and she started doing her call, and she started dipping into my life, and she started showing me, and I was like, how am I going to go to Costa Rica and do a class 1 hallucinogenic by myself in another country? How am I going to do it? I don't need to know the hows, the whens, the who, like all of it. I didn't need to know it because I wound up through a series of saying yes, showing up in love and not fear. Ultimately, gobbling up the breadcrumbs to get to a point where spirit picked me up and took me and put me in this beautiful small group of high conscious people who were going to Rhythmia, and I got invited to go with them, and it was the most beautiful, beautiful experience. Like, those things happen when you're on the right path, when you're exhibiting love and not fear, and when you have the intention that you want to do it, and you're deeply connected to a sense of, working on your soul and expanding your consciousness and healing. Right, V?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things that finds you at the right time if it's meant
Mm-hmm.
for you. And I'm just, as you were talking, I was thinking about one of my friends, and he we caught up at the beginning of 2019. Just it was just a general life catch up, and he said, "Oh, I feel really called to like do some kind of healing, like some I don't know, like I just the word he used was like some kind of pilgrimage that I want to go on."
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't know what, when, how. He was just kind of sharing this is kind of what was going on in his heart at the time. And I said to him, well, I feel the same, and this is kind of the thing that I've booked. And I had every intention to just go on my own later that year to Peru and just do everything because I felt so strongly that this was the right decision for me. As I'm talking, he's like getting more and more curious about it. So I send him all the information, and he was like, I'm going to look over it and I'm going to seriously consider it. And he'd never really heard about it before. He'd never really known about this world. And actually, to your point about doing Reiki or maybe like a bunch of other stuff, I don't think he'd actually done any of that kind of stuff before. This
Wow.
was him coming from like just personal development world. So, the rich dad, poor dad, all that kind of like
Yeah.
business mindset kind of stuff, straight into like this world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he hadn't done any other form of medicine before, like mushrooms, nothing, just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he used to drink lots of alcohol, smoked weed every now and again, but like it was not a big part of his life. And so aside from that, he'd not done any of this kind of stuff. So he came with me. He ended up coming with me. And with the benefit of hindsight, again, using his words, it was a milestone in his journey. He came back and realized that relationship that he was in wasn't serving him, and he had the courage to break up with her and made some different decisions in his career and with his family, all that kind of stuff. And I say all of that to tell people that you don't need to build like small stepping stones to prep for it. There is no prep you can do for it. If the call is there and if you
Mm-hmm.
feel intuitively that this is the right thing, you will be guided to what those steps or um, preparation is for you. For me, to give a bit of context, leading up to that time, I had only I drank alcohol and smoked weed just casually with no intention, with no nothing. And again, I wasn't really focused on this kind of stuff. Didn't even know about this kind of world too much until about 2018, 2019, when my curiosity started to naturally peak around like other forms of healing, other ways of approaching life. And up to that point, the only thing I'd done was worked with mushrooms. So I went to Amsterdam. I felt curious about working with psilocybin, so I took some there, and even then, I intuitively like created my own ceremony as best as I could. Just intuitively guided, put some shamanic music and drumming on, and then created a safe space and went into a journey. And that was my first time
Mm-hmm.
instead of watching videos and listening to what others were saying, I was experiencing what it meant to be out of your body. I was experiencing what it meant that, when people say time doesn't exist, like these are all things that you can put into words and people think, oh, that's great. Like I've heard that before, whatever. It, it's
Mm-hmm.
something else. When you experience it, it's something else because you can't use words to describe something that is beyond words. So one of the first chapters in my poetry book, Searching in Silence, is called Who Am I? And it explores the truth and the depth and the essence of who we are. And it's so difficult to write that because it is minimized by the use of words. As soon as
Mm-hmm.
you start describing these states, you minimize them. there is no way to really encapsulate the vastness and the depth of what you experience as your truth, as who you are, your soul, um, unless you use words, because that's the human form of communication, right? So I don't even know where I was going with that now, but oh
But
yeah,
it's true. You
we
were
were
being
talking about my friend.
intentional.
Yeah,
Yeah, you were,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but you, I mean, this is very interesting to me as this is unfolding because we're showing two sides of the call, right? We're showing two sides of the call.
Mm,
Everything that you do in your life, you are very intentional. You let things sit, you resonate on them, you feel into them. That's who you are. I know you so well. I do that too. But at the moment when I was hearing the call and putting action to choices, I wasn't where I am now. So I was sitting in fear and I was, pushing through and moving through different phases and different ways of being to get to like being more integrated into living the call, right? Into living a spiritual life. So it comes in many forms. And when I had this gift of going to Costa Rica, I had already had a trip planned to go away with my mother and my brother to Italy. And on that trip, Aya was working. She was already working. I was witnessing things. I was having experiences. I had to be completely void of alcohol, right? I had to eat as high vibrational as I could. So I was trying. I was in Italy. It was hard, right? To eat plant based, but I really did a good job and I'm proud of myself because that's how seriously I took it. We even went on wine tastings and stuff. But I was having moments of clarity. I knew what my intentions were. I was already sitting with what I wanted to work on with Aya when I went, the things I wanted to heal, the relationships I wanted to heal, one of which was alcohol, one of which was my mother, and I got to be with them, come come home, and then get right back on a plane and go and do this healing work. And I remember sitting in the backseat of this car driving around in Italy, watching this interaction with my mother, seeing all these experiences, like having out of body understandings of things. It was a part of the healing. It was a part of the healing. And we'll talk about like, what that experience is like, the actual ceremony and what you're talking about basically is to put words to things kind of puts a limit on them. It kind of encases them in limitation only because that's how we communicate. But the communication that happens when you're actually on the medicine is much like what you're saying. It's coming in all these various forms and imagery and intuition and just knowings immediately and unpacking different things. But that's all a part of the unknown journey that you're going on when you commit and open yourself up to consuming this and moving. I never did mushrooms in an intentional way. I only dabbled in them maybe twice in my life from the time, of being a teenager to being 48 or 49 when I did ayahuasca. But I never had experiences like that. I only had my little paranormal things that were happening as I was opening up my consciousness. Um, but, I think maybe one of the next things that we should talk about is preparing for it with your intention and what it's like to go into the journey of starting, seeing it, noticing it, witnessing it, intentionalizing it, and then we can talk about what it's like to actually be in
yeah,
intimately involved with it. How's that
yeah,
sound?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, I'll say the first thing that kind of just stands out that I want to share right before we go into this particular conversation, what you were sharing about like um the couple of things that you wanted to work on when you went into that room, into that space, you kind of had in your mind. Now, my experience is different to that in the sense of I had a whole list of things that I wanted to work on in my life. I was like my health, my family, like my purpose, like what am I here to do? Can I get clear on all of these things? And I genuinely, when I was on the plane going there, I had thought that after this week, I'll be clear on all these things. Like I just, I was just confident about it. I don't know where the
Mhm.
confidence came from, but I was like, I'm gonna know what the answers are to all these things. So I'm excited. And I go in on the first ceremony, and we'll get into this in a minute. But the reason I'm bringing this all up is because it's all to do with the prep. I
Mhm.
go in and do the ceremony. Then the next day, wake up and realize none of my questions got answered.
Mhm.
And that was the first lesson in letting go of control,
Mm.
because
Mm.
you think you need X, Y, and Z
Mhm.
answered and solutions for X, Y, and Z. And in fact, if you're open to it, what will happen is you'll be shown what you actually need, because there's a difference between what you want and what you need.
Mhm.
And I learned that on the very first day. And so when we talk about prep comes in two different ways. One is physically prepping, and that means prepping your body for the experience, for to receive this energy,
Yeah.
to work with this energy. You have to prep your body, because it's at a certain vibration that is much higher than our dense physical body. We need to create the physical space to be able to hold that and communicate with that as best we can. And so, with the guidance of people who are walking that path, I was given that guidance, um, as the rest of the group was. Kind of the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to to our trip, we had to cut out gluten, we had to cut out
Mhm.
alcohol, any form of drugs, um, avoid salt and oil as well. So anything that can really make the body feel more heavy, essentially,
Mm.
is the idea that I got from that. So there was a list of things that you had to cut out. And then 3 days before, you also have to avoid sex and stop, like masturbation, all that kind of stuff. Again, none of these things will make sense to someone who's maybe going in the first time, doesn't really have knowledge of this stuff. But the reason, at least from what I understand, the reason we do all of these things is to maintain a certain physical form going in, kind of prepping the body to um, hold that sacred, creative sexual energy, to not release it, because you'll be working with that during, and then to create the space in your system to digest the tea, to digest the medicine, to welcome the energy, um, as best you can. So that's the physical prep. And then the mental and emotional also have to come with it as well. So emotionally, to the best of my knowledge, I remember, like, I was really surrounded by people who, it was a small group. It was the two of my friends who I was going with, and then a couple of other people that I'd met through the email thread that I was introduced to, who were also going, and then Parker, and maybe a couple of other people in my life as well who had done this before, or who were interested in this kind of stuff in a very serious way. And so my circle was really small at that point, because I wanted to protect my energy. I wanted to protect my
Mhm.
emotional space. And I was living at home at the time with my parents. And I never told them what I was going to do, because
Mhm.
again, they were from a generation where this stuff is completely foreign. And
Mhm.
I would have to get into a debate with them about this and the safety
Right.
of it and this and that. And it's
Right.
like, I
Would
don't want to
change
talk to people.
things.
Yeah, I don't want to talk to
Yeah.
people who are basically laced in fear. So if you can
Mhm.
avoid that to protect your bubble and space going in, then you're less likely to be susceptible to their kind of lower vibrational energy, which is coming from a place
Mhm.
of fear, essentially, right?
Yep.
So minimizing
Protection.
that. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then mentally, you set an intention to prepare. Kind of what is it that you're going in with intentionally? Like, are you wanting to solve this problem or that problem? Or, like, do you want your heart more open? Like, whatever the words are that you want to use. Just a caveat that I would say on that, though, is go in with whatever you want to go in with, but remain
Yeah.
open to being shown something else too.
Mhm.
Because we all love control. Like, we all, as we're
That's
going into these
naturally
things,
who
we
we
all
are.
have, yeah, we
Yeah.
have a list of problems in our life that we want to
Mhm.
solve. Like, there's always going to be a list that you can provide. If someone says to you, I'm going to wave a magic wand and sort three things out in your life, you'll have that list ready at any point in your life. Most of us would.
Mhm.
So go in with those things, but go with the intention that you're also open to being shown another way, another
Mm.
avenue that you're not quite seeing right now with your limited logical mind that's planning those things as intentions. Again, like I said, like there is a difference between what you want out of the experience and what
And
you
what you
need.
get. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's the prep part, I would say, from that point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because sex, I don't remember. This came up last night because David and I we're talking about our conversation today, and the ideas and the goals we have around education and just communicating in a really intentional, loving, clear, true way about this medicine. And he said, "Yeah, we were talking about the prep," and he mentioned that no sex, abstinence, and I don't remember that. I remember what I remember that was relative to me in my life. I wasn't in a relationship, so I guess it just didn't matter. But I'm happy to hear that you've mentioned that today because that makes sense. That sexual energy absolutely makes sense. It will amplify the work. It amplifies you in your vibration. And I was so filled with control. The number one thing that I remember is this letting go. I didn't want to do it. I fought like a you know what. And I remember those times of fighting. I had a journal, I had my Reiki stones, I had my this, I had my that. I felt like I had like tools, so like I was going to somehow maneuver and control and, help guide this. Yeah, right. Okay. What was I thinking? And I can laugh about it now, but it was what I needed at the time. It was what I needed at the time. And where I went, normally there's like 100 people who are going to heal themselves from addiction, to heal themselves from trauma, from all the things. And there's a lot surrounding that. There's everyone has an energy, everyone has an entity, or there's things that you're opening yourself up to. And both of us, with our small intentional group, we both you and I were very protected, guided. We had intimate experiences that I believe now, years later, are helping us to communicate about this in a way that needs to be communicated about ayahuasca. It's something that's becoming more talked about mainstream, and you've had more experiences now since then than I have. I haven't done it since that one time. Um, but you're seeing, people there's shamans popping up all over the place, that it's become in vogue. It's become, like a trendy thing that spiritualists or new agers or whatever the word is are doing. Um, it's almost like, there's all different kinds of practitioners. There's all different levels and vibrations of practitioners. And you and I would both say that when you're thinking about doing ayahuasca, to just let be intentional about it, open your heart and love to the work, and ask for guidance. So it might be something that's presented to you, but you are able to ask for guidance. You're able to ask to be shown who is in alignment with you to do the medicine, a space, a place, the experience, right, V? And let that present itself rather than jumping into something immediately, or thinking that you've got a handle on it, right? Let her speak to
Yeah.
you, and let
Yeah.
let your guides guide you.
Absolutely. I think there is so many avenues to this.
Hmm.
And I don't mean just in terms of where you do it, but also what medicine you use as well. Because the way
Hmm.
I see this and experience this is the medicine may guide you to work with a different plant or a different medicine altogether.
Mm.
You may not need to drink ayahuasca per se, but it doesn't mean she's not working with you.
Mm.
So what I mean by that is the energy is still guiding you in your life if you're connected to her and open to her guiding you. And she may direct you to other avenues. And so I do feel like for me, I haven't done it since. I haven't felt called to it since. I'm very much opening to it now, to
Mm.
go again. But I'm also letting go of the expectation that it has to be at the same place, doing the same kind of thing. and also letting go of the fact that it will be the thing that I drink or the thing that I work with physically. The feeling I'm getting is, whilst I feel more deeply connected to her right now, I may not need to work with her directly though. She
Mhm.
may be just like coming into my life to guide me to a different direction. So
Yes.
two examples I can give for that is in 2022, um, I was leaving my corporate job in April 2022, and I'd kind of planned that coming into January. I was like, I'll stay for another couple months, get my bonus, and then begin to have the conversations internally to say I'm leaving and then have a date set and stuff like that. And then around February, I remember specifically, I was sitting in a cafe on a weekend, had my laptop and everything, and I just left. One of my friends had just left after we had coffee, and I opened my laptop and I was filling in an application to do a retreat with Parker. So he'd left Spirit Quest at this point and has shifted some things in his personal life during lockdown, moved back to the States and created this new um, community and this new form of gathering with Zachary, who you now know as well.
Mhm.
And it was called Bridge to One. And um, he was like, "No, I'd absolutely love to have you, but just as a means to formalize things, just fill in the application." He was like, I know that you don't need to, but just do it because I do think there is importance in
Mm.
writing your intention in physical words." So I was like, "Okay, cool, of course." Like, I sat in the cafe, I wrote it out, and then I left my job, and a few days before I was supposed to fly out there, I think it was around April 10th or 11th, somewhere around there. I was supposed to fly and join this group, and we were going to be maybe 10, 15 of us together. And I was going alone to Austin, and I was going to meet a whole group there. And this was to work with Wachuma. So
Mm.
it's also known as San Pedro. And again, it's from a cactus in South America, and you brew it as a tea, and then you drink it, and it's known as the like ayahuasca is like the grandmother medicine. This is known as the grandfather medicine. So it's a lot less harsh in the sense of there's no purging, there's no um, kind of strong visual stuff, and it's a lot more gentle. The way it was described to me, it's
Mm.
like your grandfather holding your hand and helping you cross the road as
Mm.
a
Hmm.
child. So it's that kind of energy. So I felt drawn to doing that work. Now, who's to say it's not ayahuasca that was guiding me in that
Correct.
direction to say this is your next step? So I
Mhm.
didn't have to physically go back in the room, drink it, and go through the whole process to get that wisdom or to get that intuitive knowing. It was already beginning to do its work.
Yeah.
So the reason I bring this story up is because a few days before I was supposed to fly, I got an email from him saying it's cancelled and I'm going to give you a full refund. Have I not told you this story?
No.
Okay,
Maybe.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so here you go. You're gonna hear it now. So it got cancelled, and so I'm thinking like, do I go? Do I stay? Because I paid, and I paid, and that included the accommodation and the food and all that kind of stuff for the whole week. So I was like, I haven't planned anything apart from my flight. So I'm like 4 days out now from flying. This is crazy. And I remember I was at my friend's reception party. One of my high school friends got married and stepped outside and got the email. And I was like, okay, shit, what do I do now? Do I stay? Do I go? And it was in that moment that I remembered the intention that he got me to write in February on the application. It came back to me. And the intention was, what would my life look like if I fully surrendered? So I was like, this is an opportunity to do
Mhm.
just that. And so I said, I'm still coming out there. I don't know how I'm going to spend my time, what's going to happen. I have no plan, but I'll find an Airbnb and then at least get myself over there and then just figure out the rest from there. So I did that. And what happened was I got there on the Saturday, spent a couple days on my own. I was at a hotel, then went to an Airbnb. And then on Tuesday, or yeah, it was Tuesday, I get a text from him saying, any chance you're free, what does your schedule look like? I would love to come over and for us to do the medicine together, and I can hold space for you if you're open to that. And I was like, absolutely. And so we did. He came over in the morning. It was like 8:30 in the morning. He did a whole ceremony. And then I set an intention, we drank it, and he drove to a place called Enchanted Rock, which is just outside of where I was living in Austin, Texas, maybe like an hour or two out.
I
And
remember this. I remember
yeah,
this now.
we went for a nice hike the whole day, and it was like 8, 9 hours
Hmm.
immersed in nature, and it was just the two of us. And then that was Wednesday. Then Thursday, I was doing something else, and then Friday we met up again and we did the same thing. So the reason I bring up that story is because that one-to-one experience was something that I did not expect
Hmm.
at all. I was expecting to go into a group to go on site to where he was. He had this like farm and stuff, and none of that happened the way that it was initially planned for it to happen. So I had to keep trusting and surrendering, and that's
Hmm.
kind of been the theme since
Hmm.
2019 in so many different ways, is to surrender to life. How much courage can you have to be
Hmm.
open to not your plan, but to the plan?
To
It's
the plan.
it's two different things.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's two different things. And that's what we say. It's the trust and surrender, the trust and surrender. It's always trust and surrender.
And I will say again, just on that point about opening yourself, and because you were saying like, um, you said something earlier along the lines of like the medicine will like find a way to get you to, you don't need to know the how,
Hmm.
like it will figure out the
Hmm.
logistics of things. As long as you feel the desire purely in your heart, like the rest of it will work itself out.
Yeah.
So that was that was one story about that post ayahuasca. The second story to give you, and then we can take this wherever you want to take it. But the second story that I think is really cool, again with the benefit of hindsight, is last year I had the opportunity to do medicine work again, and again this was with a different medicine. Um, I won't state the name here because the person who's holding space asked us not to share. But
Hmm.
the medicine we worked with, I'd never worked with it in my life. I didn't even know this combination existed. And yet, he was very, very well versed in working with this and had been doing it for years. And so last year, when the year started, I felt again really open-hearted and ready to dive into some kind of deep work. I didn't know what that would look like. Um, and what ended up happening was a really close friend of mine who you know as well.
Hmm.
Just in random conversation one day said to me, "I'm actually organizing and hosting a private retreat at my house, um, and it's going to be like 7 or 8 people that I really love, and if you're open to it, I'd love for you to come, and it's going to be in June 2023." I was like, absolutely. Like, what do I need to do? Like, I'm there. Like, I feel really strongly connected to this, like opportunity to experience this. And she was like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And she was so nice. She knew the situation I was in. She booked the flight for me there and back. She, like, let me stay at her place. And then she paid for, she'd hired private chefs for that time that we were there for 3 days. That was paid for. Paid for the facilitation of the person who was holding the space for us, and the medicine and all the costs that comes with that whole experience. That was paid for. And then we had like IV drips and massages set up the next day, knowing that as part of the integration, we
Yes,
would need to
amazing.
re-up on vitamins and minerals. So she had people come over to the house. We had individual IV drips, and we all had private massages as well to help
That's
relax the body. So
amazing.
this is not something that I could have planned, let alone
Right.
afforded at that time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And yet, because my intention was pure and it was meant to be, the right finances, the right situations aligned themselves to get me into the room. And
Hmm.
I still get goosebumps from what I experienced in
Absolutely.
that particular ceremony last
Yeah.
year. So again, I do feel open to it, but this year I have nothing planned. I don't know where it'll be, who, when, what.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'll leave that there and I'll give it back to you.
It'll all present itself as it always does. That's a whole other conversation about allowance and, letting the universe just do its work for you, and acceptance, and being in a space of being able to accept that. They're the gifts of surrender. They're the gifts of surrender, which is the same story with me. We'd love for you to be invited to this private group of high conscious people. We're shutting the whole place down. Who could ask for a more loving, high vibrational experience? I couldn't have. I didn't need to know how. You didn't need to know how. It was already figured out for us. right? And that's the beautiful part of it. And I believe also, that was Aya's work too, for both of us. I mean, specifically me, that experience, that was Aya's work. Aya's still working with us now. We both have such a desire to talk about this, to help spread the word about this. And that's Aya continuing to work. And I have visions of further things I want to take, how I want to take this further, what I want to do. And I'm seeing things unfold now. She's showing me how to take it further. It's having the intention, having the openness, and being accepting of all the things that come before you, because that's your job too, is to say yes. You had to say yes to her to be able
I had to say yes
to
to the cause.
participate. You had to say
Yeah.
yes to it. You had to. I met someone yesterday and she said, I want to know more about my gifts. I want to know more. I want to have my spiritual awakening. I said, okay, you're asking for it. That's amazing. But now you have to say yes, because spirit's going to put things in front of you. And now it's your job to buy the tickets, to say yes to things, to go to the places, to be open to what spirit puts in front of you. And that comes, in many different forms. So I think, one of the things that I really wanted to talk about with the medicine of ayahuasca is the sacred space that it is meant to be held within, and how that journey comes. And it starts way before you get into the sacred space. It's the people who are doing, you talked about the shamans, it's the people who are gathering the plants, and the respect that they have for the plants, and the rituals, and the song, and the way that they do it, and the time of day that they do it, and how they do it, and how long they take to prepare the tea. We could talk about all of those things, but the intention starts. I mean, it goes back centuries, right? Because it's an indigenous, ritualistic, sacred ceremony, healing modality. So it's passed from generation to generation. And there's an energy in that lineage. There's an energy in the stories. There's an energy in the plant itself. There's an energy from every moment of the journey of that cup of tea before it even enters your vessel. There it
There
is.
is, yeah. And that's
There is. Yeah.
yeah, and that's why the next day when I woke up after the first ceremony, so we had four that week with some days of rest in between. When I woke up the next day and I was in sharing circle and it kind of hit me, this epiphany of my first lesson wasn't to get all my questions answered, the ones I had written on the plane. It was to learn the concept of surrendering and letting go of
Mm,
control. It was to learn humility,
mm.
to learn that the power of
Ooh.
this plant, the wisdom of this plant is a lot more ancient than I am.
Mm. Mm-hmm. All knowing.
So I had to let go of my logical mind and my expectations around how this thing was going to go down and be open to allowing it to take me on the journey. Because that's what it is. It's a journey. But I don't
Mm.
think we understand what journey means. We still think, oh, I'm going to dictate how the journey goes and what I'm
Right.
going to get out of it.
Yeah.
But you have to say yes to the journey and you get carried down the river
Mm.
into an ocean that might be scary because you've never done that before. And you may
Mm-hmm.
meet parts of yourself that you have hidden away for a while, have suppressed and shut down. You may meet new parts of yourself that you haven't discovered before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all part of the journey. And yeah, it's important to do it in a sacred space that allows for all of this to come to the surface in the right way. Because I do
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of it begins with, who is holding the space? Who is the
Mm-hmm.
practitioner? Where are you doing it as well? You can't just do it in someone's garage somewhere or do it at like a hotel room or like it. For me, when I was drawn to doing it, it was just this knowing that I want to go back to its home
Yeah.
in the Amazon. I want to
Mm-hmm.
do it on sacred ground
Mm-hmm.
with sacred people. And because that was my intention, I believe it was all aligned in that way. And so I was in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of the Amazon. And to do from London, we took short flight to Amsterdam. Then from there, it was a direct flight to Lima, about
Mm-hmm.
16 hours. Then had to take a 2 hour internal flight to Iquitos, and then then had to do a half an hour boat journey into the jungle. So this was like deep in,
Deep, deep in.
and then we spent I think just over a week there, and like I said at the beginning, it was the space was held by people who deeply revered and understood
Mm-hmm.
the depth and magnitude of this medicine. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
something to just throw about to get like a quick shortcut solution, or a quick like story that you could share with your friends and family afterwards, or post about on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I remember asking Parker on one of the hikes, like any kind of stories of people who had quote unquote bad trips, and he was saying like there was a person who had done like a bunch of other drugs and stuff in his life, and he was using this as an opportunity to tick it off the list, the long list of drugs that he's tried, and
Wow.
he had a big dose and nothing happened. Nothing
Wow.
happened. There was no purging, there was no hallucinating, there was nothing. There was no change in
Mm-hmm.
his chemistry
Mm-hmm.
in the way
That
that it
was,
might have been for me, you and I. And again,
mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean ayahuasca is not working.
No.
It is working,
Mm-hmm.
but it's subjective based on what the each individual needs, based on your psychological context, based on your
Mm-hmm.
intention, based on your heart space, all of that stuff. It knows.
It does.
And
Yeah.
so because that person was coming with the wrong intention, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak,
We're not
it
giving
didn't
it to
it
you.
didn't it didn't
Yeah.
give it yeah, it didn't give him what he wanted. It gave
Mm-hmm.
him what he needed, which was be humble. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
taking you anywhere until you realize that this is not a joke. And talking about bad trips, I remember someone who, first of all, I know you didn't ask about bad trips, but I'm going to quickly say this because it's coming up
Yes.
intuitively right now, because I do think people are afraid. I got a voice note this morning from a mutual friend uh of me and my girlfriend. Like, she said, "Oh, I'm terrified of doing ayahuasca because like, what happens if I get a bad trip and I can't come out of it?" And I think the idea of a bad trip is what kind of can push people away from doing
Mm-hmm.
any of these things. And from my experience, seeing people around me live in person who've had bad trips, the only reason that happens is because you're not letting go of control.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't an
Right.
experience that happens that's negative. It's just
Right.
how open are you to embracing it and allowing it? Because if you're not, the experience is happening and you're trying to stop it. The friction is what you call a bad trip, because you're like, I don't want to see this. I don't want to experience it. I don't like where this is going. So you try and
Right.
control it.
Mm-hmm. And that fear
But
comes
but
up.
but you can't control it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to fully let go. The more you can let go, the more you'll have a pleasant experience. And I don't mean blissful meditating. That might be a
Mm-hmm.
part of it, but I mean you'll get out of it as much as um is required in that moment for you to
Yeah.
learn. Like, you'll be able to take the full juice out of it because you fully let go. So it can teach you now, because you're
Mm-hmm.
taking the role of a student. You can't try and control it
Right.
as the teacher.
Yeah.
You have to go in and fully embrace the role of student, that I'm being taught by this
Mm-hmm.
medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I saw when I took it the first time, the so every night there was a different shaman, and they were all the shamans of the establishment. They were all lovely, and the ceremony was so respectful. And I think the next follow up to this would be, let's I want to hear I think that we'll have an episode just talking about your experience, every single thing about your experience. I want to hear that, and then you can interview me talking about my experience,
Mm,
so that people can like
mm,
hear what happened during the experience, understand
mm,
how we healed, and all of the things. But I'm just hearing that now. But to talk about that fear and letting go, they actually had like a little time in the beginning where you could go and meet the shaman and just sit with him, and just kind of get like a little greeting, and he could do a little prayer over you, and that made me feel good. Like, everything about this experience was what I needed for my first ayahuasca experience, and the sacred space was being cleansed. And they recommend like how much you should take. And I had this beautiful woman, Morning Star, who I was so scared going up, but I knew I had to do it. I had so much fear, which is what I was going through, was my fear, that my body was shaking. I was in fight or flight. But I was sitting in that line, walking up one step at a time, and this beautiful woman, Morning Star, put her hand on my back, and she just guided me. She guided me. First, she was in front of me, and I was touching her. And then as I got closer, she moved behind me and put her hands on my back. And they knew that it was my first time. The shaman knew, and he gave me just what I needed at that moment. But when I consumed it and I sat on my mat, it was 30 minutes, for it to integrate into your body. I fought that thing. I fought it. My control was like, I don't want to release it. I don't want to go in. I don't know what to expect. I don't know. And Aya was so kind and loving to me. Aya gave me this beautiful little, I was in like a candy shop with like magical, like beautiful, sweet things moving. And it was like, but the visualization is what I needed as an artist, to be like kept in a sweet, safe spot. She knew, I mean, what I needed. And the fear will come up. If you're holding on to a tremendous amount of fear, it's going to manifest itself in that way. Or if somebody has a bad trip, it's the fear that they need to release. It's coming up, and they might see fearful visions. They might have fearful experiences where they're being chased by something, whatever. That fear needs to leave. That fear wants to find its way out. You have to move through it. So I is allowing you to move through it in a way that they, I say they, but it's, I guess, she and your guides and all of whom are working for you, with you, they know that you can handle it, and you get through it, and you're able to reflect on it. And it's a tremendous, tremendous experience. And you do it again, and it's a different experience. And you do it again over the course of 4 days. You're doing it multiple times, and every single one of them is a surrender. It's the biggest the biggest lesson of surrendering. I mean, allowance, letting go in the grandest way
Mm,
possible.
yeah, it is. And one thing that I'm just remembering as you're talking is like you won't necessarily get the epiphanies there and then
Hmm.
around what the answers are to the stuff that you need answers for in your life.
Hmm.
So the surrender really comes in not just physically when you're in the room experiencing and letting go and letting your body relax, but also knowing that whatever it is, wisdom wise or insight wise, that you need to receive and understand and process, that will happen in time. It may not happen in that room. And
Hmm.
the two kind of pieces of wisdom that I took away from that experience around that concept is um, Don Howard, who was the individual who set up Spirit Quest. He unfortunately passed on right before I had my ceremony, so we couldn't meet him in person at least. But his energy was present, and one of the things that was shared about him was that he says that 2% of the work is what's in the cup when you're in the room. 98% is in the
Hmm.
integration after.
Hmm.
So what the way I receive that is really what you're doing when you drink is to plant the seed. It's not going to be that you drink it and your whole life is resolved. It's planting seeds for certain insights about your life to come
Hmm.
if you take the time to integrate and nurture yourself, all elements of
Hmm.
yourself. The more you do that, the more you protect that garden. If imagine your soul as a garden, you protect all the plants that are growing there that you planted seeds for. They will then blossom and bloom, and you'll be able to recognize, oh, that means that, and that means that. That's connected to that, and oh, I get why
Hmm.
that was planted next to that one, and like, but
Hmm.
you can't see it at the beginning. All you
Hmm.
see is mud. You're like, what? Okay, well,
Hmm.
what's the difference? I went, and now I've come back, and like, I don't. Maybe I've learned one or two things,
Incredible.
but it's not
Yeah.
right.
It's
So
so incredible.
you have to take the time to nurture and be patient as well. And so
Hmm.
there's that. And then the other thing is like once you start walking this path, it becomes like the beginning and the end of each ceremony becomes really blurred and the lines get blurred. And so then, as Parker likes to say, all of life becomes a ceremony
Hmm.
because you're like, well, the epiphanies I'm having and the things that I feel inspired to do, maybe months later, is it coming from when I was in that room, or is this something else? Or so at that point, you just let go and you're like, oh, like now I'm being pulled by something else entirely.
Hmm.
And I don't have to be in that room in that specific week, that time period, drinking a specific thing with certain people for this to be working. It's always working. And so then you start to shift your intention away from just um, how you are in that specific time in that room, and then how you are for the rest of your life. You shift the intention from compartmentalizing to like, I
The
see
whole,
all of this as
yeah,
ceremony. Each day I wake up, I treat my life as a ceremony, and bring intention to each day as best I can.
as best I can. Because you've learned so much just about yourself, just about yourself, stepping up, being there, doing it. Not even just what you're learning from Aya, just about yourself.
Mm,
It was so, personally, I was so proud of myself that I did it because I I didn't tell anyone about it. There was maybe one person that I told. I was, fear. I'm telling you, I had a lot of fear because I was stepping out of a part of my life that was no longer and moving into the next part of my life. And ayahuasca was that bridge between both sides, right? And I thought that there was a certain kind of stigma to saying that you were doing ayahuasca, and how would that be received in my real life, in my corporate world. And when I was there, they were actually filming a documentary about it. There was a filmmaker there, and he asked me if I wanted to be a part of it because I was a first timer, and no one else, there was only a handful of us. And I have fear because I was still sharing custody with my ex-husband, and I didn't know how it would be received. People don't understand it. And so coming out of that experience, the courage, the listening, the interaction with Aya, the visions, the understanding, the lessons, and then with me, there was a whole experience on the final day that changed me, my spirituality, and how I work with my spirituality and my gifts as a physical being, on this in this 3D world. And then my life's work changed. So I was listening, and I was understand it was a big picture, a puzzle that was being put together. And that was one piece of it. That was one piece of it. And it's amazing. And we're getting close. We have a little bit of time left, but one of the things, and I think we'll probably do a whole episode on this, honestly, because it's so huge, is integration. When you get back home, you get back on that plane from Peru.
yeah. Yeah, I do. I am intuitively getting the sense that it's time to wrap this one up because we just shared so
Yeah,
much anyway. But
we
yeah,
did.
there is integration is a big one. And again,
It's a big one.
I'm not talking from the point of view of being an expert and having done thousands and thousands of ceremonies. This is just
No.
my experience, my
Mm-hmm.
learning, and what I've the insights that I've received as I've taken the time to be intentional
Mm-hmm.
about my healing and my journey afterwards. Because you have to protect your space when you get back. Because when you get
Mm-hmm.
back, there is going to be
You're
so many.
open.
Everyone thinks you're you still,
You're
but
not you.
you're not you, but they treat you like you're you still.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difficult. The integration is like, how do I insert myself back into my old life? But
Mm-hmm.
you can't.
No,
And
it's like a child
that's
being
where the
born.
courage comes from,
Mm-hmm.
reshuffling and jigging your life a little bit to
Mm-hmm.
fit this new version of you because
Mm-hmm.
you're not the same person. You've shed some layers whilst away, and now you're coming back. And I've had this experience multiple times, having done deep work, not just with medicine, but like with a coach
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. Flown away to Ireland, come back, and I'm like, "Ah, man, I've got all these insights and breakthroughs, but everyone else is still the same. So now what? What do I do? I feel this is so weird. And then at the time I had a job, so I would go back to work in the office, and I'm like, this feels
How do I
so
do this? How do I
yeah,
do this?
this
I
is
can't
yeah,
say.
it feels so surreal.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
because I
is.
tried to hide that part of myself for the longest time, but now I'm learning slowly that actually there's no need to have different faces in different situations. I'm just going to bring
No.
all of me to every situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that you and I, my friend, that's how we found each other, through the integration and being able
Mm.
to talk for hours about our experience and what we were having happen in our life and how we were dealing with it. And I mean, every time we spoke, we were actually going through the same thing at the same time, which is continuing until this very
Yeah.
day, and will continue.
Surprise,
And it's
surprise. Yeah.
2024. We cannot speak for like 4 or 5 weeks, and I'll send you a voice text and you'll say, I'm going through the same exact thing right now. And it's fascinating, right? So I would love, and I I loved this time to be able to not just talk with you, my friend, but to talk about this. And I feel like it needs to be spoken about. And I want to continue the conversation, and I want to interview you from beginning to end, like every step of your journey of what you want to share, to help, so we can help other people. And then I'd love to share my journey. And then I'd love to talk about integration, like spend a whole
Mm.
episode talking just about integration. And it would be really fun to interview other people and bring some people that maybe we've even shared the space with, to see what their experience was like, and just keep the dialogue moving around this to educate as many people as possible. And I couldn't ask for anyone better to do it with than you.
Oh, thank you. I love you, and I love our
I
time
love you
together
too.
as well.
Me too. I love you so much. So quickly, tell people where they can find you. Give them your information.
Yeah, so I'll send you this information so you can put it in the
Yeah.
link wherever the link's going to be anyway. But Instagram at Vipul Bhesania, Substack, which is a writing platform that millions of people are now using. So my newsletter on Substack is called Soul Wisdom, and you can get my poetry book on Amazon, Searching in Silence. So those are the three places.
Yeah. Excellent. And anyone who's on the portal, um, his book is in our resource section, so you can go check it out there. And until we talk again about ayahuasca and everything else, thank you.
Yes, until next time.
Okay. I hope today's episode sparked insights for you on your healing journey. If you're searching for support and connection, you should join our community at spirit-calling.com. Spirit Calling is a like-minded community of spiritual individuals learning, sharing, and growing together every day. No matter what you're experiencing in your journey, you'll find resources and a community to support you along the way. Until next time, keep listening to your internal guidance and stepping into your spirit's call.